Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Amanda, and I am coming to you live from the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California. I'm standing in front of our Shark Lagoon exhibit right now. Now, of course, I'm not really standing in front of it. I'm in a studio, and my friend Miss Talia is helping make this all possible, so you can see Shark Lagoon behind me at the same time I'm in the studio. But it is to let you know that we have an exciting topic today. We are going to be learning about sharks, but not just learning about it with a pre-designed lesson plan for you. This is your opportunity to ask all the questions you've been wanting to ask about sharks, all the things that you've been wanting to know. What we would love for you to do is participate along with us and text in any questions that you might have about sharks to the number that you see on the screen right now. It's 562-286-1838. And if there's something that you're wondering about or some observations that you're making that you'd like to share with us during the class time, we would love to hear from you. And Talia will be able to relay those messages to me so that I can answer them during our program together. Now, if you happen to be watching this at a later time, you are welcome to email us your questions at live@lbaop.org. And one of our educators will be happy to respond to those as soon as we have the opportunity. So no matter when you're watching, we'd love for you to participate along with us. So as I said, I'm standing in front of Shark Lagoon. You can see some of the sharks in the background, but you'll also notice that there are a lot of other fish swimming around. So the first question I would like to throw out there to you all is a shark a fish? Let's start with some basics because we want to know, if we're talking about sharks, what kind of animal is a shark? Is a shark a fish? I'm kind of curious to know what you think. Do you think yes or do you think no? And I'll move off the screen for a little bit. Maybe you can even take a closer look at some of the fish that are in here, some of the sharks that are in there. Oh, you might even notice a bonus right here. We have a really nice view of our reticulated whiptail ray. So we've got some stingrays in here as well. So we're focusing in on sharks though. What do you think? Are sharks fish? If you say yes, sharks are fish, you can go ahead and text that in to 562-286-1838. If you say no, I don't think sharks are fish, then if you don't think so, go ahead and tell me what you think they might be. Do you think they're birds? Do you think they're amphibians? What are these creatures? Or are they their own special category all to themselves? So what are these animals? Now, you might be at home watching this later and you're like, I can't really text in right now. I don't have my parents' permission. That's okay. You can actually just shout it out to the screen right now. So again, my question is, are sharks fish? Yes or no? Well, we'll go ahead and answer that question by making some observations. Think about what animals you do know. We'll obviously start with that. We have that understanding. It is an animal, of course. But I would say that most of you would agree that sharks are definitely not birds, because what do we know about birds? Birds have wings, they have feathers, they have beaks, none of which we really see on these sharks. Okay, so what's another idea? Well, it could be a mammal, I suppose, like us. And what do mammals have? Well, one of their distinguishing characteristics would be hair. And I certainly do not see any hair growing on these sharks. And yeah, and I've never seen a shark that's like feeding its young, nursing its young. That's another mammal characteristic. So they don't seem to be producing any milk. So I think we're safe to say they're not mammals, they're not birds. But what do we get with the other options? Did we get anyone, Talia, who happened to say whether they believed a shark was a fish or something else? I know you're writing down some other things. Okay, we're getting your feedback now. So stand by. Oh, Mrs. Gutierrez's class all say yes. Yay! You're all agreeing yes. Is there anyone who thinks anything else? Okay. We're scrolling through, and it's great because we're getting lots of questions. So we're going to give Miss Talia some time to write down all those questions. So thank you for writing those down for us. So I'm going to agree with Miss Gutierrez's class that yes, a shark is a fish. So they have the basic characteristics that fish have. So the ones that you see swimming around in here, we see that they have fins. We know that they live underwater. They have to be able to breathe, and they're not air breathers like mammals or reptiles. They instead breathe the water through. I'm sure you can all shout out loud right, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. What do they breathe with? That's right. I think I heard it. They breathe with gills. So sharks, just like fish, breathe with gills. They have fins on their body to help them swim through the water. And they are cold-blooded, another thing, and have, they have a skeletal structure, which is interesting. But that's where things get a little tricky and where sharks start to separate from other fish. So a shark is a fish, but it's something about that skeleton. Do any of you know what is special about a shark's skeleton? Because it does differ quite a bit from the skeleton of the other fish that you see swimming around in here. And of course, they all seem to disappear right at the time I'm saying that. Oh, there's one little fish in there. So I'm going to give you a second because we have a little bit of a delay here to see if any of you watching might know what's special about the shark skeleton versus the other fish skeletons that we see here. How are they different? So, Miss Talia, if you can go ahead and give me feedback when you see something coming in. I know she's still feverishly writing down all your questions, so we'll get to those in a moment. So thank you for waiting patiently. But we do get a nice view of Shark Lagoon and some of those animals and the brightly colored coral that we have. It's actually artificial coral, but brightly colored artificial coral there in the center of that exhibit. And, I'm looking at one of our black tip reef sharks swimming by right now. You can tell it's a black tip because of that lovely black tip on its dorsal fin. Okay, so it sounds like maybe we've stumped some people. Okay, that's great. So you all get to learn something new today about shark skeletons. Are you ready? Shark skeletons are not made out of bone. Sharks have no bones in their body whatsoever. They still have a skeleton, so they're still vertebrates, like we are. A vertebrate is any animal that has a vertebrae, like a backbone. Your backbone is actually a bunch of bones all stacked on top of each other called vertebrae. So sharks are vertebrates. They have vertebrae, but it's just not made of bone. It's made out of something else. So now maybe that sounds familiar to some of you. You're like, oh, I think I've heard this before. And now their skeleton is made of something that you and I also have in our bodies. It's just not bone. Does anyone know out there what it might be? What else might shark skeletons be made out of if they're not made out of bone? And I'll give you a hint. It actually is a lot lighter than bone. So it's one of the ways that sharks can help stay floating in the water, even though they don't have the little floaties inside of themselves like these other fish do that we call air bladders or swim bladders. So these fish here, these are what we call bony fish because their skeletons are made out of bones. But these bones allow them, or they are pretty heavy in the fish's body, but they have something in swim bladder that they can expand with air so that they float up to the surface, just like if you're wearing some sort of floaties or something made with air, it's going to help you float. And then if that fish wants to dive deeper into the water, they let out that gas from the air bladder, that swim bladder, and they are able to dive down deeper. Sharks don't have that. They don't have the ability to change their buoyancy with a swim bladder. Instead, they have a liver inside of them that has lots and lots of oil. And oil, if you ever try to mix oil and water together, you'll notice that they don't really mix. You can try to shake it. It might look like they mix for a little bit. Think about a salad dressing. Maybe you've seen it in Italian salad dressing. You shake it and it looks all mixed for a little bit, but then it settles and all the oil goes to the top because it's less dense than the water and the other things in the dressing. And so that also helps a shark to float because they had a lot of oil inside their body, which helps overcome some of the water that would be kind of pushing them down, weighing them down. So let's get back to that other question. Did anyone happen to say what they thought shark skeletons might be made out of? Oh, no. Okay. Well, everyone grab hold on to your ears and now wiggle your nose. What are your ears and your nose made out of? That's the same material that shark skeletons are made out of. It's called cartilage. So everyone can say that on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Cartilage. So cartilage is what the structure of shark skeletons is made out of. Now, this is really interesting if we're trying to learn about old extinct sharks, like sharks that were around when the dinosaurs were around. We know about dinosaurs because we found their bones. Even though we never saw a live dinosaur with our eyes, we have found their bones. We know that they existed. Well, with sharks, it's a little bit trickier because if they don't have bones, they don't create the same fossils that bones do. Cartilage doesn't form those same sorts of fossils. So it's really hard. All we know about sharks that lived a long time ago is what we can find from their teeth, because their teeth do stick around. And we'll take a look at some shark teeth in a little bit. But we are now getting your questions. Well, we've been getting them for a while, but I'm getting a chance to see them now. So Stephanie is wondering, what are the gills for? Oh, Stephanie, that's a great question. And I was hoping that maybe we could get a really good view. That one shark just swam by us a little bit too fast, and I think I was standing in front of it. But the gills, here's a great picture of a great white shark, and you can see the gills right here. Now, I say the gills, but these are really what we call the gill slits. So they're like little slits on the side of the shark's body. You can see, let's count them together. See how many gill slits there are. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is pretty typical of sharks. Most sharks have 5 gill slits on each side of their body. And as we watch them swim through the water, it's important for sharks to be able to do this, but not all sharks need to constantly swim so that they can use their gills more effectively. And I'm going to have Miss Talia bring up a picture. I'm going to have her search for it a little bit. But we have a picture of a zebra shark sitting on the bottom of Shark Lagoon. And I want you to take a look at those gill slits that we were just looking at. And then I want you to think about how they might be using those gills, because we might be able to see a video. Because with a picture, you can't really tell. But look right here. What do you notice about these gills? What do they remind you of? What are they doing? Do you see how they're kind of moving, kind of opening, closing? What might those gills be helping that shark to do? Well, breathing, just like we take in a breath and let it out. We don't really have to think about it a whole lot. Well, that's how sharks use their gills. So gills are able to do the same thing that our lungs are able to do, but in a different way. We use our lungs for breathing air. We are breathing in, take a deep breath. All that air is going into your lungs, and then your lungs are pulling the oxygen molecules, the oxygen out of the air, and helping put it into our body, and our blood takes it all around our body so that we're getting the oxygen that we need to survive. If we didn't have oxygen, we wouldn't be able to breathe. Well, that is also true of sharks, but you don't see the shark come up to the air or coming up to the surface of the water to breathe air, obviously. That doesn't work so well for sharks. Instead, because they're in the water all the time, they can actually just breathe the water. And the way they're able to do that is by bringing the water in, sometimes in through their mouth. So you'll notice the mouth is opening here too. See that? So a little bit, you might be able to see that mouth kind of opening just a little bit. So they're bringing the water in, and then they're pushing it out through their gills. So their gills are located just underneath those gill slits. So as the water is being pulled in through their mouth and it's going over the gills are pulling the oxygen out of the water. So there's oxygen in the air, there's oxygen in the water as well. And they're pulling it out of the water, and then they are sending it through their bodies, through their blood. And that's how sharks are able to breathe. So the gills are used for breathing. And some sharks, just like this zebra shark here, can sit on the bottom and breathe all on its own just by pumping the water across their gills. But that great white shark that we saw earlier is a different kind of shark. It's what we call a ram ventilator. And think of it as, they have to ram the water past their gills to help them breathe. It is a type of shark that cannot stop swimming. If it stops swimming, it will not be able to pump the water across its gills on its own. It doesn't have that same ability that many other sharks have. So it is true that some sharks need to keep swimming to stay alive so that they can breathe. Black tip reef sharks are another example of those that we have in Shark Lagoon. Great white sharks, those are animals that need to constantly be swimming. But that is what those gills are used for. So it's kind of neat to know that sharks have different methods of breathing, but they all use those gills. And like I said, most of them have 5 gill slits on each side of their head. Now, maybe you notice right here, it has an extra opening. Those are called spiracles. Stingrays have those too, but a lot of bottom-dwelling sharks will have those. It's another way that they can be breathing in the water and helping them pull the water in and then push it out through their gills. Okay, Sebastian was wondering, do sharks drink water? Well, Sebastian, that's a great question, because all living things need to be able to have water to survive, right? Well, they don't drink it in the same way that you and I drink a glass of water. since they're surrounded by water, they're actually getting most of their water from the foods that they're eating, from the fish. Every living thing has a water in them to help them survive. And so the sharks are able to get the fresh water that they would need from the food that they eat. But they have the ability to handle salt water in a way that our bodies are not able to. So they can expel some of the salt that they don't really need based on how their bodies are designed. So it's a little bit different. They don't have to gulp down water. They're pretty much getting it with the food that they eat. And that's true of most animals in the ocean, is they get their fresh water source from their food. So good question. Royal, do they smell? Oh, they can smell really stinky sometimes. No, I'm kidding. How do they smell? That's a good question too, because us thinking about smelling in the water, if we tried to smell in the water, we wouldn't be able to, because it would go into our nose, and then where would that lead? Into our lungs, and that would be a really big problem for us because we can't breathe water. We would drown. And so what they do, though, is if you look right here, you might be able to see these little openings. They have something called nares, N-A-R-E-S, or nares, depending on how you want to say it. And that allows them to sense the chemicals that are in the water, and it goes into their nares. And what's different is it doesn't go into like lungs like we have. They only use them for smelling and not for breathing. So they can actually pick up chemicals that are in the water, and sharks have a really good sense of smell. They could scent, like if you were to take a big pool and drop one little scent of like, oh, I don't know, choose a favorite thing like vanilla, a drop of vanilla, they would be able to sense that one little drop of vanilla in that whole huge entire like million drop swimming pool. So they do have a very good sense of smell. And then Alexandra was asking how do they use the restroom? Well, they don't get a designated restroom to go to the bathroom. They have to just use the ocean all around them. So where does it come out? Well, that's a good question. You can probably guess. It's not coming out their gills. That's not where their waste comes out. They actually have something called a cloaca. And a cloaca is kind of a fun sounding word. It starts with a C. And a cloaca is where all their waste comes out of their body. And it's actually just past where this picture is able to show us. So we can't really see it. Be back there. We'll give you a better picture where we can see the full body of a shark. And it actually might help to understand their fins and know what their fins are called, because that will help us identify where that cloaca would be. This fin right here on their back, this is a dorsal fin. Dorsal means back. So any animal that has a fin on its back has a dorsal fin. And you'll notice they have two dorsal fins. So two dorsal fins. And then these fins here on the side are called pectoral fins. They use those for kind of steering and also helping give them lift as they swim through the water. And then we have, these are pelvic fins. And just like we've got pelvic bones right by our hips. So this is kind of like their hip sort of area. And then right here, this last fin is called an anal fin. And an anal fin is right behind where their cloaca is. So right here is where their waste would come out. And their anal fin will help them actually break off that waste. So it just kind of comes out into the water. Kind of just a messy mess. It just goes into the water and just disintegrates into the water. And probably there's other little fish that'll end up eating that and thinking that that's really tasty stuff to eat. Isn't that a lovely thought? But yeah, that's where it comes out. So that's where they go to the bathroom. They just do it wherever they want, wherever they're swimming. It just goes into the water. And then another question from Brooklyn, why don't sharks eat the fish in the tank? That is a question that almost everyone wonders when they come to the aquarium and they look at the sharks in Shark Lagoon. Why aren't they eating those fish? How are you keeping those fish alive? Did you have to train the sharks? And the answer is no, we did not have to train the sharks. Not all the animals in here, all these fish, are necessarily part of the diet of the sharks that we have in here. So the sharks are actually picky eaters, believe it or not. They don't just eat anything. And our aquarists, who are the ones who take care of them and in charge of feeding them, have to be a little creative sometimes in how they present their food, because they've learned that sharks can be picky. They don't just eat whatever we give them. So some will eat shrimp and fish and like smaller animals. Some will eat some larger animals, meatier. Some might enjoy squids, some might not. So not everything that just swims around is something a shark is going to eat. They're kind of picky eaters. But we do feed our sharks on a regular basis. They get fed once a day, every single day. And you might think, what? They only get fed once a day? Well, normally a shark out in the ocean, they can go 10 days between meals. So it's not unusual for a shark to eat a meal and then go several days without eating at all. Well, what we do is we give different amounts of food to different kinds of sharks, depending on their size and what their species is and what it is that they like to eat. And then we measure that every single day and we give them just the right amount of food for them. And if they don't want to eat it, they don't have to. But we keep track of how much every single shark eats. And we know that it's one of the ways that we can kind of tell how an animal might be feeling, or keeping track of different times of the year when an animal might eat and when they might not eat, so that we're familiar with it. We want to make sure that they're healthy, because sometimes if you're not feeling well, maybe you don't want to eat, you kind of lose your appetite. Well, that can happen to animals too, and it's one of the few ways that we can tell, because many times animals don't show things outwardly. They don't go around and mope and act really sad. But we do look for behaviors in our animals to make sure they're healthy, and also their appetite. And so as long as they're eating well, that's a good sign that they're doing well. So these sharks get fed more than they necessarily need to have, so they're really not interested in all these healthy animals swimming around in here. In fact, sharks tend to be kind of the vacuum cleaners and the cleaners of the ocean. And so they're kind of lazy, and they don't like going after those good, strong, healthy fish. They would rather take the one that maybe has a tear on its side and isn't as fast as a swimmer, that the shark can be a little bit lazy itself and just go for the easy one to grab. And then they help keep the diseases and sicknesses in the ocean down too, because they're taking care of all those sick things. So great question about that and why they don't eat the fish in there. Tatiana says, how do they sleep? That's a really good question too, Tatiana, because especially for those sharks that need to keep swimming, what do? They have to constantly move. Well, what they do is similar to how dolphins will shut down half of their brain at a time. So they still are moving, and they're still making sure they're not like bumping into things. Because obviously if we were to close our eyes and just be walking, we might hit something that would be really bad. But sharks, they don't really close their eyes. Their eyes are open. They're just not necessarily taking in a whole lot, or they're not really processing a lot of the information coming in that their eyes might be getting, because all they want to do is just be able to keep moving forward. They want to make sure they're not running into something, but it's not like they're on a hunt for food. It's not like they're going over exploring something new they've never seen before. They're just simply moving, and so they rest kind of brain at a time, keeping all the things moving or active that they need to, so that they're not running into things or I don't know, doing something else dangerous to them, but just allowing them to still get their rest. But they don't necessarily sit down on the bottom, close their eyes, and turn on their side and go to sleep. Like I said, there are some you might notice, even like our stingray here, that do rest on the bottom, but they don't really have eyelids to close. They do have some coverings. Some sharks have coverings that go over their eyes to protect them when they are eating, called nictitating membrane, but they don't really use those when they're sleeping. Okay, and then Johnny says, how strong are sharks' teeth? Oh, Johnny, they are very strong. They are the only hard part on their body, really, that will also create a fossil. In fact, speaking of fossils, this is a model of one, of course, but this is a tooth of a megalodon. So a megalodon tooth model again, and this is all we know about megalodons. We've known that they've existed because we have found their teeth, and they're very similar to a great white shark tooth, which is a lot smaller, but very similar shape, very similar style, whereas if we were to look carefully at the edges of these teeth, we would notice that they have ridges on them. And those ridges are great for eating large things. Let's see if we can... Oh, focus, focus, focus. Maybe I need to turn the light on, make it a little bit better. Here we go. Let's see if this will help. Oh, sorry, don't adjust. Don't worry, your vision is not bad. It's just there. Okay, and then here, maybe I'll put him like this. So it might be a little bit easier to see on the great white shark teeth, their edges that they have right there. And then let's see. What happened? Well, okay, well, I'm going to go off of that because I can't move it. I seem to have stuck. But you can see these little ridges here. We call those serrated edges, which are great for eating things that are large that they can kind of cut into. when they're eating. And then, so the teeth are very tough, and it's not just teeth that they have in their mouth. Do you happen to know where else sharks have teeth besides inside their mouths? We actually have, I think we can probably find a picture where we can give you a closer look. And these, believe it or not, are little tiny teeth. If you look, there on each one of these bumps, there are teeth. And these teeth have a special name. They're called dermal denticles. And you think about dermal, like epidermis. Your epidermis is your skin. It's the outer covering. And denticle, that reminds me, oh, I need to schedule an appointment to go see the dentist. Oh, the dentist. What does the dentist take care of? Your teeth. So dermal denticles, literally translated, means skin teeth. And what we're looking at here is a close-up view of some shark skin. So sharks actually have teeth on the outside of their bodies too, not just inside their mouths. Now, of course, the teeth on the outside of their body are not used for eating, obviously. They're just used for protection. And it also helps them to be very streamlined swimmers as they swim. In fact, the Olympics had to put a little ban on certain suits that people were designed after shark skin dermal denticles because they found it actually helped them to swim faster. So Sarah was asking, how do sharks have babies? Sarah, that is a great question too, because there's two different ways, or actually three different ways. Sharks can have babies either giving live birth, just like people do, and a little shark baby will come out right that same spot. Remember we were talking about the cloaca where they get rid of their waste? Well, that's also the same spot where the babies come out. So if they give live birth, they can just give birth and a little baby shark comes right out of their body just like that. And then there can be another way though. They could also lay eggs and hatch out of those eggs. So some sharks are egg layers, and the mom will just lay some eggs at the bottom of the ocean. She'll usually swim around something like a rock because those eggs have something that they use to attach. And I only have a dried egg of a zebra shark egg right here. But on the ends of this egg, here you go, you can see them really well in this picture. They have these little filaments that kind of stick out, and they're very sticky, and they help them to hold on to a rock so that when they come out, this comes out of the shark mom's body first, and then she can kind of wrap that around something, and then it anchors that egg in place. And here you can see the baby shark growing inside the egg casing, which is pretty cool. And then when it's ready to go, when it's ready to hatch, it comes right out the end of this egg and off it goes to start its life on its own. But mama shark take care of her eggs. That's it. A shark is on their own, very independent. And then Tiris's class says, how far away can they smell blood? Ooh, that's a good question. Up to about a mile away, potentially. Depends on how much water is in the area. But yeah, they have a very sensitive nose. But that's actually not quite as strong. It's not their strongest sense. Their strongest sense is definitely their hearing. So they can sense low frequency vibrations in the water, definitely up to a mile away. But the sense of smell is actually a little bit less than that. So it's their second strongest sense that they have. But potentially a mile away, maybe not quite that far, but a good long distance. They say it's usually like 1 drop of something per million drops of water. So depending on how that's spaced out, that will give you an idea. And then, let's see, is it A-Y or is that X? Okay, Aeon, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, wants to know, how do sharks have oil in their body? Oh, that's a good question. How did it get there? I don't know exactly what it is that allows their body to physiologically create oil, but they have just a lot of oil. So it's not like they're eating a bunch of greasy hamburgers and fries or picking it up from like oil spills. It's not that kind of oil. It's the oil that's naturally produced in their bodies. So their bodies are producing it naturally, and they contain it in their liver. So that's where all that oil is. So I wish I was a little bit more of an expert if you wanted to dive into that a little bit more, but all I can tell you is that it's produced inside their bodies. And Stephanie says, how long do sharks live? So sharks, that's a good question too, and we're still learning. A lot of your questions we're still learning more things about. And so we have learned that some sharks might live over 100 years, maybe 200 years even. Some say even more than that. And I believe it's the Greenland shark right now that they're believing is the longest living shark, which is well over 100 years based on the methods that they're using for dating these. Normally we'd say, oh, we thought they used to live maybe as long as 70 years. Or maybe they only live like 30 years. So it probably just depends on the species of sharks and where they live and what their lifestyle is like. But they have learned that sharks could live over 100 years. But probably not most species. So 70 is probably a good guess, or a good average. Let's see, did I get, oh, and real quickly, Brooklyn was asking, what does cold-blooded mean? Cold-blooded means they cannot control their body temperature, so it changes with the environment around them. And Tatiana says, do sharks eat people? I'm happy to say that no, they do not like to eat people. We are not on their menu. Yes, people have been attacked by sharks before, but the good news is they leave the people alone and they go. And fortunately, we do not taste very good to sharks. So most sharks are actually 3.5 feet or smaller and have really, really teeny tiny teeth and eat really, really tiny things and are not interested in people whatsoever. In fact, we have divers that get into the water with our sharks, even here in Shark Lagoon, every week. And we have some sharks that are fed by hand by our divers underwater. And they say they're just like puppy dogs. But and then also real quick, just boom, boom, boom. I know we've gone over a little bit on time, but you have great questions. Chelsea wants to know, do sharks have blood? Yes, Chelsea, they have blood. They're taking that oxygen all throughout their body. And case one, each other. You know what? Just like any living creature, sometimes they get upset with each other and they might not get along. They might both want the same food and they might get in the way of each other. But for the most part, our sharks in Shark Lagoon get along pretty well. But just like any living animal, they might get upset with each other. I have actually witnessed 2 sharks eating each other in any sort of mean way. I think basically what happens is like, hey, you're just too close to me. Like, leave me alone. And they just let them know and off they go. And then Kayla says, do sharks lay eggs? Yes, we answered that question. Some sharks do, some sharks don't. And then Allison says, do they have ears? And yes, they have ears, but it's inside their head. So we don't really see them on the outside, but they do have that ability to hear because it is their greatest sense. Well, thank you all today for your wonderful questions. I hope you enjoyed learning about sharks along with me today. If you're ever interested in just watching our sharks at any time, you can go to our website and go to our exhibit webcams, and you can watch them as they're swimming in Shark Lagoon at any time. So feel free to enjoy the aquarium, even if you can't physically view our sharks. You can watch them from the comfort of your own home. So have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend, everyone. And also, if you could do me a favor, teachers, if you could let me know how many students are in your class so we can get an idea of how many people we might be reaching. We would love to get that feedback so we know how many viewers or how many actual eyes are on the other side of each viewership that we have. That would help us out. But thank you again for joining us, and we will be back next week for more Aquarium Online Academy. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.